believers. Galilee was more Gentile than Jewish when Jesus was born. 3. Among the Gentiles. Although the social and economic condition of the Roman state was not of the highest order, the widespread domestic peace and prosperity was propitious for the bestowal of Michael. In the 1st century after Christ, the society of the Mediterranean world consisted of 5 well-defined strata. 1. The aristocracy, the upper classes with money and official power, the privileged and ruling groups. 2. The business groups, the merchant princes and the bankers, the traders, the big importers and exporters, the international merchants. 3. The small middle class. Although this group was indeed small, it was very influential and provided the moral backbone of the early Christian Church, which encouraged these groups to continue in their various crafts and trades. Among the Jews, many of the Pharisees belonged to this class of tradesmen. 4. The free proletariat. This group had little or no social standing. Though proud of their freedom, they were placed at great disadvantage because they were forced to compete with slave labor. The upper classes regarded them disdainfully, allowing that they were useless except for breeding purposes. 5. The slaves. Half the population of the Roman state were slaves. Many were superior individuals and quickly made their way up among the free proletariat and even among the tradesmen. The majority were either mediocre or very inferior. Slavery, even of superior peoples, was a feature of Roman military conquest. The power of the master over his slave was unqualified. The early Christian Church was largely composed of the lower classes and these slaves. Superior slaves often received wages, and by saving their earnings were able to purchase their freedom. Many such emancipated slaves rose to high positions in state, church, and the business world. And it was just such possibilities that made the early Christian Church so tolerant of this modified form of slavery. There was no widespread social problem in the Roman Empire in the 1st century after Christ. The major portion of the populace regarded themselves as belonging in that group into which they chanced to be born. There was always the open door through which talented and able individuals could ascend from the lower to the higher strata of Roman society. But the people were generally content with their social rank. They were not class-conscious, neither did they look upon these class distinctions as being unjust or wrong. Christianity was in no sense an economic movement, having for its purpose the amelioration of the miseries of the depressed classes. Although women enjoyed more freedom throughout the Roman Empire than in her restricted position in Palestine, the family devotion and natural affection of the Jews far transcended that of the Gentile world. (4) Gentile philosophy. The Gentiles were, from a moral standpoint, somewhat inferior to the Jews, but there was present in the hearts of the nobler Gentiles abundant soil of natural goodness and potential human affection, in which it was possible for the seed of Christianity to sprout and bring forth an abundant harvest of moral character and spiritual achievement. The Gentile world was then dominated by 4 great philosophies, all more or less derived from the earlier Platonism of the Greeks. These schools of philosophy were: 1. The Epicurean. This school of thought was dedicated to the pursuit of happiness. The better Epicureans were not given to sensual excesses. At least this doctrine helped to deliver the Romans from a more deadly form of fatalism. It taught that men could do something to improve their terrestrial status. It did effectually combat ignorant superstition. 2. The Stoic. Stoicism was the superior philosophy of the better classes. The Stoics believed that a controlling reason fate dominated all nature. They taught that the soul of man was divine, that it was imprisoned in the evil body of physical nature. Man's soul achieved liberty by living in harmony with nature, with God. Thus virtue came to be its own reward. Stoicism ascended to its sublime morality, ideals never since transcended by any purely human system of philosophy. While the Stoics professed to be the offspring of God, they failed to know him, and therefore failed to find him. Stoicism remained a philosophy. It never became a religion. Its followers sought to attune their minds to the harmony of the universal mind, but they failed to envisage themselves as the children of a loving Father. Paul leaned heavily toward Stoicism when he wrote, "I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content." 3. The Cynic. Although the Cynics traced their philosophy to Diogenes of Athens, they derived much of their doctrine from the remnants of the teachings of Machaventa Melchizedek. Cynicism had formerly been more of a religion than a philosophy. At least the Cynics made their religio-philosophy democratic. In the fields and in the marketplaces they continually preached their doctrine that man could save himself if he would. They preached simplicity and virtue and urged men to meet death fearlessly. These wandering Cynic preachers did much to prepare the spiritually hungry populace for the later Christian missionaries. Their plan of popular preaching was much after the pattern and in accordance with the style of Paul's epistles. 4. The Skeptic. Skepticism asserted that knowledge was fallacious, and that conviction and assurance were impossible. It was a purely negative attitude and never became widespread. These philosophies were semi-religious. They were often invigorating, ethical, and ennobling, but were usually above the common people. With the possible exception of cynicism, they were philosophies for the strong and the wise, not religions of salvation for even the poor and the weak. 5. The Gentile religions. Throughout preceding ages, religion had chiefly been an affair of the tribe or nation. It had not often been a matter of concern to the individual. Gods were tribal or national, not personal. Such religious systems afforded little satisfaction for the individual spiritual longings of the average person. In the times of Jesus, the religions of the Occident included 1. The pagan cults. These were a combination of Hellenic and Latin mythology, patriotism, and tradition. 2. Emperor worship. This deification of man as the symbol of the state was very seriously resented by the Jews and the early Christians, and led directly to the bitter persecutions of both churches by the Roman government. 3. Astrology. This pseudo-science of Babylon developed into a religion throughout the Greco-Roman Empire. Even in the 20th century, man has not been fully delivered from this superstitious belief. 4. The mystery religions. Upon such a spiritually hungry world, a flood of mystery cults had broken, new and strange religions from the Levant, which had enamored the common people and had promised them individual salvation. These religions rapidly became the accepted belief of the lower classes of the Greco-Roman world, and they did much to prepare the way for the rapid spread of the vastly superior Christian teachings, which presented a majestic concept of deity associated with an intriguing theology for the intelligent and a profound proffer of salvation for all, including the ignorant but spiritually hungry average man of those days. The mystery religions spelled the end of national beliefs and resulted in the birth of the numerous personal cults. The mysteries were many, but were all characterized by 1. Some mythical legend, a mystery, whence their name. As a rule, this mystery pertained to the story of some god's life and death and return to life, as illustrated by the teachings of Mithraism, which for a time were contemporary with and a competitor of Paul's rising cult of Christianity. 2. The mysteries were non-national and interracial. They were personal and fraternal, giving rise to religious brotherhoods and numerous sectarian societies. 3. They were, in their services, characterized by elaborate ceremonies of initiation and impressive sacraments of worship. Their secret rites and rituals were sometimes gruesome and revolting. 4. But no matter what the nature of their ceremonies or the degree of their excesses, these mysteries invariably promise their devotees salvation, deliverance from evil, survival after death, and enduring